The air inside Tactical Edge training facility was crisp and dry, carrying the faint scent of gun oil and rubber from the polished concrete floor. Metal detectors framed the glass entrance as Alex Keene stepped inside, her boots silent against the surface. Overhead speakers echoed with range safety protocols while a group of men passed by, laughing and slapping each other's backs as they headed toward the equipment lockers. Alex's fitted black tactical shirt clung cleanly to her frame, utility belt snug around her waist, dark cargo pants spotless and professional. No sponsor patches, no branded caps, no flashy modifications, just quiet focus wrapped in practical gear. She paused near the sign-in desk where shooters had crowded together, checking clipboards and comparing custom rifles like teenagers showing off sports cars. A printed roster labeled Elite Qualification Round sat nearby, names highlighted with scheduled times. Her own name was penciled in dead last, A. Keene, 4:30 p.m. Blake Renshaw, tall and broad with a bicep tattoo peeking from his sleeve and mirrored Oakley's perched on his head, spotted her across the room. He snorted and nudged Trey Garrison, who was loading magazines with theatrical precision, each click deliberately loud. Guess corporate decided to send their diversity higher, Blake muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. His comment carried across the space like he intended. Trey followed his gaze and smirked, fingers still working the magazine spring. Look at that setup. Stock everything. Probably borrowed it from the rental counter. They chuckled as a folded paper passed between. Hands nearby, an informal betting pool, columns of names with cash amounts scribbled beside predicted scores. Alex's name wasn't listed. She said nothing. Her gaze swept the facility layout visible through the observation windows, then returned to the qualification requirements posted on the wall. She exhaled slowly through her nose and adjusted the rifle sling on her shoulder, the movement economical and practiced. A gleam of worn silver caught the light briefly at her waist, a smooth coin half hidden in a belt pouch. Her fingers brushed it once, a gesture so quick it might have been imagined, before she folded her hands and waited. While the others bragged about their custom triggers and competition scores, she stood still, watching with the kind of quiet attention that made the air around her feel different, sharper. No one noticed the silence forming in her space, or how it seemed to absorb their noise without giving anything back. The facility's lead instructor, Marcus Webb, emerged from an office with a clipboard, his weathered face scanning the crowd. 23 years in the Marines, then a decade training. Law enforcement, he'd seen every type of shooter walk through these doors. But when his eyes briefly met Alex's across the room, something made him pause. She nodded once, respectful, professional, and he found himself nodding back before he realized why. Blake caught the exchange and rolled his eyes. Even the staff's going easy on her. This is exactly what's wrong with these corporate inclusion mandates. Relax, Trey grinned, slapping a full magazine into his customized AR. She's going last anyway. By the time she gets up there, we'll have set the bar so high she'll need a ladder just to see it. The laughter that followed had an edge to it, the kind that came from men who'd never been challenged by someone they couldn't immediately categorize and dismiss. They'd sized up every other shooter in the room within minutes, trading stories about previous competitions and mutual acquaintances in the tactical community. But Alex remained an unknown variable, and that made them uncomfortable in ways they couldn't articulate. As the group migrated toward the briefing room, Alex remained near the wall, her attention fixed on a small bronze plaque mounted beside the equipment rack. It was tarnished with age, nearly hidden behind posted safety notices. The inscription read, Beta Testing Team, System Development 2019. Below that, a list of names in small print, including one that would mean nothing to the men filing past. Her A. Keene, Dev 07. She didn't look at it long. She already knew it was there. The first hook was set, not in what anyone said, but in what they didn't know. The quiet woman they'd dismissed as a corporate checkbox had a history with this place that ran deeper than any of their bragging rights. And in 3 hours, when the qualification round began, that history would speak louder than all their noise combined. The briefing room hummed with anticipation, its walls lined with matte black panels and a row of mounted screens displaying drill footage from previous evaluations. A floor-to-ceiling schematic of the shooting course dominated the front wall, showing 3 connected chambers with narrow corridors, rotating targets, and simulated blind corners that had broken more egos than the facility cared to count. Marcus Webb stood beside the central display, his voice cutting through the chatter with practiced authority. "Listen up. You've got 60 seconds from the first buzzer, 12 rounds maximum, no reloading, eliminate only red-marked hostile targets. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, hit any green-labeled VIP targets. Each chamber has variable lighting and randomized timing. Any breach of safety protocol, muzzle control violation, or civilian casualty ends your run immediately." Blake leaned back in his chair, arms folded behind his head like he was lounging at a beach resort. 60 seconds? What is this, amateur hour? I can clear 3 rooms in half that time. Save some stopwatch for the rest of us, hotshot, Trey laughed, flexing his tactical gloves under the fluorescent lights. The reinforced knuckles caught the glare as he made exaggerated finger guns at the target display. The dozen other shooters filled the remaining seats, most sporting gear that cost more than many people's monthly salary. Custom rifles with extended handguards, high-end optics, and offset iron sights rested against their legs like faithful dogs. They discussed their setups with the reverence of car enthusiasts, trading specifications and trigger weights while completely ignoring the tactical. Briefing still in progress. Alex sat alone at the end of the row. Her rifle remained simple, unmodified, resting upright against her leg with no custom accessories or flashy attachments. She hadn't spoken once since entering, her eyes moving steadily between the briefing screen and the printed safety protocols on the wall. Her fingers rested lightly against the grip, not wrapped for control, just balanced for awareness. Nobody addressed her directly. A few shooters glanced her way occasionally, but their attention slid off like water on glass. Her silence didn't fit their template of either dangerous competitor or harmless observer. Webb continued his briefing, but Blake's voice cut across him mid-sentence. "Hey, Marcus, what's the facility record for this course? Just so we know what we're shooting." 4. The instructor paused, clearly annoyed at the interruption, but professional enough not to show it. "The current standard is based on law enforcement qualification requirements. This isn't a competition. It's an assessment." "Come on," Trey joined in, grinning at his audience. "Someone's got to hold the high score." "What is it, 45 seconds? 40? Webb's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The benchmark time is classified operational information. Your job is to pass the minimum standard, not chase records." Blake and Trey exchanged looks, the kind that said they'd already decided the classified time was probably embarrassingly slow. Their confidence filled the room like cologne applied too heavily. In the control booth, visible through reinforced glass, technician David Chen sat monitoring the pre-run systems check. His fingers moved across multiple screens, calibrating target response times and verifying sensor arrays. When his terminal displayed the shooter roster, his eyes caught on one name and lingered. Something about A. Keen triggered a memory he couldn't quite place. He pulled up the facility's historical database and ran a search. The results made him sit back in his chair. Alex Keen wasn't just another corporate shooter. She was listed in the System Development Archives, tagged as a primary consultant on the original course design. Her biometric data was already in their system, dating back 6 years to the facility's beta testing phase. Chen glanced through the observation window at the woman sitting quietly in the back row. She looked familiar now, like someone he'd seen in old project photos, but never connected to a real person. He made a note in his log but said nothing to his colleague. Some information was better discovered than announced. Meanwhile, Blake had launched into a story about his last competition, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. "So I'm clearing the final room, right? Target pops up at 11 o'clock, another at 2. Boom, boom, both down before most people would have even acquired the first one. Range officer said it was the cleanest run he'd seen all day. The audience of tactical." Gear enthusiasts nodded appreciatively, each probably calculating how their own story could top that one. Alex remained motionless, her attention seemingly focused on the schematic display, but her peripheral vision captured every gesture, every brag, every assumption being laid out like cards on a table. She understood something they didn't. In 3 hours, none of their stories would matter. Only the targets would tell the truth, and targets never lied to impress anyone. The briefing ended with Webb's final warning about VIP targets, the green-marked silhouettes designed to test judgment under pressure. Civilian casualties are automatic disqualification, no exceptions, no appeals, think before you shoot. As the shooters filed out, their voices already rising with fresh speculation about course records and betting odds, Alex remained seated. She studied the schematic one more time, her eyes tracing the corridor layouts and target placement zones. With the familiarity of someone reading a map of their hometown, she knew every angle, every delay, every split-second decision point they'd face. After all, she'd helped design them. The main shooting bay stood ready, its modular layout configured into 3 interconnected chambers that looked deceptively simple from the observation deck. Plywood walls reinforced with steel joints created temporary kill houses that could be reconfigured in minutes. But today's setup had been locked in place for weeks, long enough for rumors to spread among the tactical training community about its difficulty. Blake stood at the equipment check station, field stripping his rifle with theatrical precision while maintaining a running commentary. The key to these courses is reading the angles before you even step through the door. Most people react to targets. I hunt them. Trey nodded along while adjusting his custom red dot sight, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly car payment. Exactly. You can tell the amateurs because they wait for targets to present. Professionals know where threats are hiding before they show themselves. Their audience had grown. Word about the qualification round had spread through the facility's casual networks, instructors taking breaks, off-duty staff, even a few students from other courses who'd finished early. The betting pool had expanded, too, with Blake as the clear favorite and side bets on whether anyone would pass at all. Alex remained near the rear wall, her position giving her a clear view of both the shooting bay and the growing crowd. She'd moved once to check the updated schedule but hadn't joined any conversations or equipment discussions. Her rifle stayed, slung, untouched except for the single press check she'd performed an hour ago, a quick verification that had taken less than 2 seconds and drawn no attention. Marcus Webb approached her, his expression professionally neutral, but his body, language suggesting something more personal. Ms. Keene, I wanted to verify your qualification status. The system shows you have prior facility access, but I don't have your background documentation. Before Alex could respond, Blake's voice carried over from the equipment station. Background. Documentation, what is this? The Pentagon? It's a shooting test, not a security clearance interview. Several shooters chuckled, but Webb's expression didn't change. He'd dealt with Blake's type before, skilled enough to be dangerous, loud enough to be distracting, and just insecure enough to need constant validation from an audience. Protocol requires verification for all shooters, Webb replied calmly. No exceptions. Alex reached into her tactical vest and produced a slim folder, handing it to Webb without fanfare. He opened it, scanned the contents, and his eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. Inside were consultation contracts, system access logs, and technical specifications that told a story none of the other shooters would understand. This should be sufficient, he said, handing the folder back. Thank you. The exchange took less than 30 seconds, but it had been observed by everyone in the vicinity. Blake sensed something had shifted, some dynamic he couldn't identify but didn't like. Let me guess, he called out, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Special exemption for the corporate representative. Different rules for different people? Webb turned toward him, his patience visibly thinning. Everyone follows the same safety protocols and performance standards. No exceptions. Right, Blake smirked, but his confidence seemed forced now. Same rules, different enforcement. Got it. Trey stepped closer to his friend, lowering his voice, but not enough to avoid being overheard. Dude, let it go. We'll settle this on the range. But Blake wasn't ready to let it go. Something about Alex's quiet presence, her unexplained documentation, and Webb's deferential treatment had triggered his competitive instincts in a way that felt personal. He'd built his reputation on being the alpha in rooms like this, and her silence was somehow undermining that position without her saying a word. In the control booth, David Chen was piecing together information that painted a picture none of the shooters suspected. Alex Keene's consultation files showed she'd been involved in the original design of this exact qualification course. More than involved, according to the timestamps and revision logs, she'd been the primary architect of the targeting algorithms and timing sequences they'd all be facing. He pulled up the beta testing footage from 6 years ago and found what he was looking for: grainy video of a woman running through an early version of the course with movements that looked effortless, mechanical, and impossibly precise. The timestamp showed a perfect score achieved in under 50 seconds, a record that had been sealed when the course went operational. Chen made another note in his log and glanced through the observation window. Alex hadn't moved from her position, but now he understood why her stillness felt different from the others. She wasn't preparing for an unknown challenge. She was waiting for a reunion. The first shooter was called to the line, not Blake, but a relative unknown named Danny Martinez who'd been quiet throughout the briefing. His run lasted 37 seconds before ending in disqualification when he hit a VIP target while trying to engage a hostile that appeared simultaneously. The crowd muttered about difficult target timing and poor visibility, but Alex showed no reaction. She'd watched the run with the same steady attention she'd given everything else, her eyes tracking not the shooter's movements but the target deployment sequences she'd programmed years ago. Blake stepped up to the line with exaggerated confidence, rolling his shoulders and cracking his neck like a prizefighter entering the ring. "Time to show everyone how this is done," he announced to his audience. But as he settled into his ready position, something felt off. The quiet woman in the back wasn't watching him with the mix of anticipation and intimidation he expected from observers. She was looking at him the way a chess master might watch a novice contemplate their opening move, with patient, almost sympathetic understanding of what was about to happen. The feeling was unsettling in a way Blake couldn't articulate, so he pushed it aside and focused on the course ahead. In 60 seconds, he'd proved that all his confidence was justified. The targets would fall, the crowd would cheer, and the mysterious woman would learn what real shooting looked like. He had no idea he was about to face the very system she'd created to humble shooters exactly like him. Blake's run lasted 43 seconds and ended with the sharp buzz of disqualification. He'd charged through the first chamber with aggressive confidence, engaging targets with rapid precision that drew approving nods from the watching crowd. But in the second chamber, muscle memory and competitive instincts betrayed him. When two targets appeared simultaneously, one red, one green, his shot placement was clean and fast, hitting both center mass. The buzzer's harsh tone echoed through the facility as the lights returned to neutral white. "Shooter disqualified. VIP casualty," the automated system announced with mechanical indifference. Blake emerged from the course, red-faced and gesticulating at the control booth. That timing was off. The green target deployed late. There was no way to distinguish hostile from civilian in that lighting. Marcus Webb approached him calmly. "Target deployment is randomized and within specifications. Your shot placement was textbook on the wrong target." "Bullshit," Blake snapped, his voice carrying across the facility. "I've run courses like this 100 times. That was a system malfunction." Several shooters nodded in agreement, their solidarity born from shared apprehension about facing the same challenge. If Blake, with all his experience and custom gear, could be eliminated by what appeared to be an unfair target presentation, what chance did the rest of them have? Trey went next, approaching the line with visible caution that contrasted sharply with his earlier bravado. His run was methodical, controlled, and ended at 58 seconds when he exhausted his ammunition allowance without neutralizing all hostile targets. No disqualification, but no pass either. "At least I didn't shoot any civilians," he muttered, casting a pointed look at the control booth. The third shooter, then the fourth, then the fifth. Each run ended in failure. Missed targets, timing violations, VIP casualties, and safety infractions created a growing atmosphere of frustration and mutual commiseration. The betting pool had devolved into side wagers about whether anyone would pass at all. "This course is rigged," Blake announced to the assembled group, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "The target timing is inconsistent, the lighting transitions are too fast, and the VIP placement is designed to trick shooters, not test tactical judgment." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several shooters pulled out their phones to record testimony about the unfair course conditions, building a collective narrative that would protect their reputations when word of their failures spread through the tactical community. Alex remained against the rear wall, her expression unchanged by the mounting complaints around her. She'd watched each run with the same focused attention, noting not the shooter's failures, but the precise execution of targeting sequences she'd calibrated years ago to separate genuine skill from manufactured confidence. David Chen, monitoring from the control booth, observed her stillness with growing understanding. While every other person in the facility was reacting to the failures with surprise, frustration, or vindication, she showed the calm of someone watching expected outcomes unfold exactly as designed. The sixth shooter, a heavily built man named Russell Porter, approached Alex directly. "Hey, you're up soon, right? Any thoughts on what we're dealing with here?" It was the first time anyone had addressed her as a potential ally rather than an outsider. The question carried subtext, an invitation to join the consensus that the course was unfairly difficult and possibly malfunctioned. Alex looked at him for a moment, her response measured and quiet. "The course is working as intended." Her words cut through the ambient noise like a blade through silk. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Blake, who'd been building momentum with his complaints about system failures, found himself staring at the woman who'd just contradicted everything he'd been saying. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Are you suggesting that course is fair? That 12 consecutive failures are just coincidence?" "I'm suggesting," Alex replied calmly, "that the course measures exactly what it was designed to measure." The silence that followed was different from her usual quiet space. This was tension, sharp and brittle, waiting for someone to break it. Blake stepped closer, his posture shifting into something more aggressive. "And what exactly do you think it measures, sweetheart? Because from where I'm standing it looks like a computer program having a bad day." The endearment was deliberate, calculated to diminish and dismiss. Several shooters shifted uncomfortably, the kind of discomfort that came from watching a line being crossed publicly. Alex didn't react to the provocation. Her voice remained level, professional. "It measures decision-making under pressure, target recognition accuracy, judgment when engaging threats in proximity to non-combatants, movement discipline, fire control." "Right," Blake scoffed, "all of which I've demonstrated in dozens of competitions and real-world applications. But somehow this magical computer says I'm not qualified." "The computer doesn't make qualifications," Alex replied. "It records them." Marcus Webb had been watching the exchange from across the room, his military-trained instincts recognizing the escalation pattern. He moved closer but didn't intervene. Yet. Sometimes conflicts needed to reach resolution naturally, and he sensed this one carried implications beyond simple competitive disagreement. Blake's face was flushed now, his usual confident smile replaced by something harder. "You know what? I think you're running your mouth about things you don't understand. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Let's see how you do against that fair course before you lecture the rest of us about what it measures." The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Every person in the facility understood its implications. Blake had essentially accused Alex of being all theory and no practice, a criticism that cut deep in a community where credibility was earned through demonstrated performance under pressure. Alex checked her watch. 4:25 p.m. 5 minutes until her scheduled run. "Okay," she said simply. The single word carried no emotion, no defensiveness, no counter-challenge, just acceptance, but somehow it felt like the most dangerous thing anyone had said all day. Blake had expected argument, justification, or retreat. Her calm agreement left him momentarily off balance, like swinging at an opponent who'd stepped aside at the last second. "Good," he recovered, his voice louder than necessary. "Let's see if you can back up all that technical talk with actual shooting." Alex walked toward the equipment station to perform her final preparation check. As she passed Blake, she paused, just long enough to speak quietly, words meant only for him, but overheard by everyone in the immediate vicinity. "The course record is 49.3 seconds, she said, "set during beta testing 6 years ago." Then she continued toward the line, leaving Blake and everyone else to wonder how she could possibly know information that Marcus Webb had refused to disclose earlier. The betting pool had just become irrelevant. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about proving who understood what real shooting looked like. Alex approached the preparation line with the same measured pace she'd maintained all afternoon. The crowd had quieted, their earlier complaints about course difficulty replaced by focused attention on the woman who'd just claimed knowledge of classified facility records. Marcus Webb stepped beside her as she performed her final equipment check, a process that took less than 30 seconds and revealed the stark difference between her approach and everyone else's. Where other shooters had spent minutes adjusting custom optics, testing trigger pull, and cycling magazines, Alex simply verified her chamber was clear, checked her safety, and adjusted her sling once. "Miss Keene," Webb said quietly, "I should mention that while course records aren't typically disclosed, your information is accurate. May I ask how you're familiar with beta testing data?" Before Alex could respond, Blake's voice cut across the space. "Let me guess, more special documentation, more corporate access privileges?" Webb turned toward him, his patience finally exhausted. "Mr. Renshaw, you'll have an opportunity to observe and learn. I suggest you take advantage of it." The rebuke was mild but delivered with enough authority to silence Blake's next comment. He stepped back, arms folded, his expression making it clear he expected vindication when Alex's run ended in the same failure that had claimed everyone else. David Chen leaned forward in the control booth, his screens displaying more information than he'd revealed to anyone. Alex's biometric baseline showed heart rate and respiration levels that were actually lower than her resting measurements, a phenomenon he'd seen only in a handful of elite operators who treated high-stress situations as opportunities for enhanced focus rather than sources of anxiety. Her historical data painted a picture that explained everything. 6 years ago, as the facility's beta testing consultant, she'd run this exact course configuration 47 times. 46 runs had been for calibration and timing adjustment. The 47th had been her final validation run, completed in 49.3 seconds with 0 penalties and perfect target discrimination. That record had been sealed not because it was classified, but because it was so far beyond normal human performance that publishing it would have discouraged legitimate users from attempting the course. Chen glanced at his colleague, a newer technician named Paul, who'd been monitoring the day's failures with growing skepticism about the system's fairness. "You might want to record this one," Chen said quietly. "Another failure?" Paul asked. "No," Chen replied, his eyes fixed on Alex's approach to the starting position. "The opposite." Alex paused at the threshold of the first chamber, her rifle held in low, ready position. The automated system began its pre-run sequence. "Shooter. Online. Prepare for course initiation. Remember, red targets are hostile, green targets are civilians. Engage only confirmed threats." She closed her eyes briefly, and for just a moment the facility fell away. She was back in an Arizona canyon, lying prone on sun-baked stone while her father's voice carried on the desert wind. "You don't pull the trigger. You wait until the shot wants to leave." The memory lasted less than 2 seconds. When she opened her eyes, she was entirely present. Entirely. Calm and entirely ready. "Course initiated. Timer starts now." The buzzer sounded, and Alex moved forward with fluid precision that immediately differentiated her from every previous runner. Where others had charged or crept, she advanced with controlled purpose, her rifle tracking smoothly as she scanned for threat indicators. The first target snapped up from behind a corner barrier, red-marked, clearly hostile. Her shot came without apparent haste, the sound sharp and clean in the enclosed space. The target dropped instantly, hit center mass with surgical precision. A second target appeared to her right, this one green-marked, a civilian. She tracked it with her muzzle but held fire, waiting for the threat assessment to complete. Weska. It revealed itself as neutral. She moved on without hesitation. In the observation area, the earlier complaints about unfair target timing suddenly seemed hollow. Alex's target discrimination appeared effortless, her decision-making instantaneous. And accurate. She wasn't struggling with the course's challenges, she was demonstrating how those challenges were meant to be overcome. The second chamber presented a more complex scenario: multiple targets in proximity, mixed hostile and civilian designations, reduced lighting to simulate real-world conditions. Alex entered with her rifle at the ready, sweeping methodically to clear corners while maintaining awareness of potential target zones. Two silhouettes appeared simultaneously, one red, one green. The combination that had eliminated Blake and challenged every subsequent shooter. Alex paused, her rifle trained on the space between them, waiting for optimal target separation. The hostile target shifted slightly, creating a clean engagement angle. Her shot was immediate and decisive. The red target dropped. The green remained untouched. Blake found himself leaning forward despite his skepticism. The woman's movement through the course looked nothing like the aggressive, gear-heavy approaches he was accustomed to seeing. Her style was minimal, efficient, almost meditative in its calm precision. "Lucky timing," he muttered to Trey, but his voice carried less conviction than before. The third chamber was where most shooters had met their final failure. A complex environment with multiple concealment positions, variable lighting, and target presentations designed to test both shooting skill and tactical judgment under severe time pressure. Alex entered with 47 seconds elapsed, well within the time limit, but approaching the threshold where most shooters began making desperate choices. She showed no signs of urgency, maintaining the same controlled pace that had characterized her entire run. A target appeared at the far end of the chamber, partially concealed behind a barrier. Red designation, confirmed hostile, but positioned to require precise shot placement to avoid hitting structural elements that would constitute a safety violation. She settled into a supported firing position, her body alignment textbook perfect, and delivered a single shot that found its mark with mechanical precision. The target dropped cleanly. The final buzzer sounded. Course complete. Time, 49.4 seconds. All hostile targets neutralized. 0 civilian casualties. 0 safety violations. Qualification passed. Alex lowered her rifle, engaged the safety, and walked back toward the starting line with the same unhurried pace she'd maintained throughout. Her expression showed neither relief nor satisfaction, just the quiet acknowledgement of a job completed correctly. The facility had fallen completely silent. Not the uncomfortable quiet of earlier, but the profound stillness that followed witnessing something exceptional. In the control booth, Paul stared at his monitors in disbelief. How is that even possible? She made it look easy. Chen nodded slowly. Because for her, it was. The scoreboard updated with clinical precision. Keen, A, 49.4 seconds, qualified. Perfect score. Below it, a long list of disqualified and failed entries served as testament to what everyone had assumed was an impossible standard. Marcus Webb stepped forward, his voice carrying across the silent facility. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our first qualification of the day. Congratulations, Ms. Keene. The polite applause that followed was scattered and uncertain. Most of the shooters seemed caught between admiration for her performance and confusion about how she'd made their collective failure look so effortless. Blake wasn't applauding. He stood rigid near the equipment station, his jaw clenched and his eyes fixed on the scoreboard like he could change the numbers through sheer force of will. Everything he'd built his reputation on — speed, aggression, custom gear, competitive victories — had just been quietly demolished by a woman with a stock rifle and no fanfare. "There's something not right here," he announced to the room, his voice carrying an edge of desperation he was trying to mask as righteous indignation. "Nobody shoots a perfect score on their first run through an unfamiliar course. Nobody." Several shooters shifted uncomfortably. Blake's statement echoed their own thoughts. but saying it aloud felt like sour grapes after witnessing Alex's flawless performance. Trey, sensing his friend's emotional state, stepped closer. "Blake, maybe we should—" "No," Blake cut him off, his voice rising. "I've been shooting competitively for 12 years. I've trained with special operations units, worked with federal agencies, placed in the top 3 at nationals multiple times. I know what human performance looks like, and what we just saw, isn't it?" Alex had moved to the rear of the facility, checking her equipment and preparing to leave. She hadn't acknowledged the score, hadn't celebrated, hadn't even looked at the scoreboard. Her calm detachment only fueled Blake's frustration. "I want to see the footage," Blake demanded, addressing Marcus Webb directly. "Full video review of her run, side by side with the target timing data." Webb hesitated. Video review wasn't typically provided unless there were safety violations or disputed calls, neither of which applied to Alex's performance, but Blake's challenge was public, and several other shooters were nodding agreement. "Mr. Renshaw, the run was clean and properly monitored. There's no basis for a formal review." "Then let's make it informal," Blake pressed. "If everything's legitimate, there should be no problem showing us exactly how she managed to do what 12 other qualified shooters couldn't." The tension in the room was escalating beyond simple competitive disappointment. Blake's implications that Alex's performance was somehow fraudulent bordered on accusations of cheating or system manipulation. David Chen watched from the control booth as the situation developed below. He held information that would resolve the conflict instantly, but revealing Alex's role in the course design would require disclosing proprietary facility data. His protocol manual was clear. Operational security took precedence over personal disputes. But as Blake's voice grew louder and his accusations more direct, Chen made a decision that would change everything. He opened his terminal to the facility's historical database and pulled up a file that had been sealed for 6 years. With a few keystrokes, he transferred the data to his supervisor's station and sent a priority message. "Urgent. Review attached beta testing records. Current situation requires disclosure authorization." The response came back within minutes. "Authorization granted. Full disclosure at supervisor discretion." Chen stood and walked to the control booth's observation window. Below, Blake was in full rhetorical flight, his voice carrying across the facility as he built his case for why Alex's performance was impossible. No sight adjustments, no range time, no familiarity with the course layout. She walks in here, shoots a perfect score faster than the supposed facility record, and we're all supposed to accept that as normal? The crowd was listening now, some nodding agreement, others looking uncomfortable with the direction of Blake's accusations. Alex remained near the exit, her expression unchanged, but her stillness somehow more pronounced. Chen activated the booth's intercom system. His voice cut through Blake's speech with electronic clarity. "Mr. Renshaw, could I have your attention, please?" Blake turned toward the control booth, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption. "What?" "You asked about Ms. Keene's familiarity with the course layout. I can provide some clarification on that point." Chen's tone was professional, neutral, but something in his phrasing made everyone in the facility turn toward the booth. Even Alex, who'd been moving toward the exit, paused and looked back. "The course you ran today is designated Configuration Delta 7. It was designed and calibrated in 2019 during our beta testing phase by a team of tactical consultants working under contract with the facility." Blake's expression shifted slightly, uncertainty beginning to replace righteous anger. "Okay, so?" "Ms. Keene was the primary consultant on that contract. She designed the targeting algorithms, timing sequences, and performance metrics you've all been evaluated against today." The silence that followed was absolute. Not the quiet of respectful attention, but the vacuum that forms when everyone in a room simultaneously realizes they've been operating under completely wrong assumptions. Blake's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, comprehension, and finally a red flush of humiliation as he understood the implications. He'd spent the afternoon criticizing a system as unfair and poorly designed, unaware that its architect was standing quietly in the same room. "She designed this course?" Trey asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chen nodded. The facility record Mr. Webb declined to disclose? 49.3 seconds, set by Ms. Keene during final system validation testing. Today's run of 49.4 was actually slightly slower than her original record. Blake stood frozen, his mouth slightly open as the weight of his afternoon crashed down on him. Every complaint about unfair target timing, every criticism of poor course design, every implication that the system was rigged, all of it had been directed at the woman who'd created the very standards he'd failed to meet. The other shooters began exchanging glances, their earlier solidarity with Blake's accusations evaporating as they realized the true scope of their misunderstanding. They hadn't been defeated by a malfunctioning system. They'd been measured against a benchmark set by its creator. Alex finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the silent facility. The course isn't designed to be easy, it's designed to be fair. She walked back toward the center of the room, her movement drawing every eye. For the first time that day, she had everyone's complete attention not because of what she might do, but because of what she'd already done. Every timing sequence, every target placement, every decision point you encountered today was calibrated to test real tactical skills under realistic pressure. The difficulty wasn't arbitrary, it was intentional. Blake found his voice, though it came out strained. Why didn't you say anything? Why let me? Because, Alex replied calmly, the course speaks for itself. It doesn't matter who designed it if you can't pass it. The simple truth of her statement hit like a physical blow. Blake had built his entire afternoon on the assumption that failure indicated system problems rather than shooter limitations. Now, faced with evidence that the system worked exactly as intended, he was forced to confront a more uncomfortable possibility that maybe the problem had been him all along. Marcus Webb stepped forward, his expression carrying a mixture of professional respect and personal vindication. He'd suspected there was more to Alex's story, but hadn't pressed for details. Now everything made sense, her documentation, her calm confidence, her unruffled response to the course's challenges. Ms. Keene, he said formally, I believe some of our shooters would benefit from understanding the principles behind your course design. Would you be willing to provide some insight? It was both a request and an opportunity, a chance for Alex to educate rather than simply demonstrate, to transform the afternoon's conflict into something constructive. Alex considered the request, her gaze moving across the assembled shooters. Most looked genuinely interested in learning. A few appeared embarrassed by their earlier assumptions. Blake looked like a man reconsidering everything he thought he knew about his own abilities. The most common mistake, she began, is treating speed and accuracy as competing priorities. They're not. Precision enables speed, not the other way. Around. She gestured toward the course, visible through the observation windows. Every target presentation is designed to reward patience and punish haste. The timing seems unfair only if you're fighting against it instead of working with it. Trey raised his hand tentatively. But how do you know when to wait and when to shoot? Some of those target combinations seemed impossible to distinguish quickly enough. That's the point, Alex replied. If you can't distinguish quickly enough, you shouldn't be shooting quickly enough. The course rewards good decisions, not fast reflexes. The conversation that followed was unlike anything the facility had hosted before. Instead of competitive bragging or technical gear discussions, the shooters found themselves engaged in a genuine seminar on tactical decision-making, led by someone who understood the subject at a level none of them had imagined possible. Blake remained mostly silent, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but avoiding any attempt to reassert his earlier confidence. The afternoon's events had fundamentally altered his understanding of his own competence, and he seemed to be processing that realization in real time. As the discussion continued, David Chen compiled a report for his supervisors about the day's events. The sealed beta testing records were now part of the official facility history, available for future reference and training purposes. Alex's involvement in the course design would no longer be classified information, but more importantly, the facility had witnessed something rare, a perfect demonstration of the principles it was designed to teach. Alex hadn't just passed their test. She'd validated the entire system by showing what mastery looked like when measured against its own standards. The betting pool had been forgotten entirely. Money seemed trivial compared to the education they'd all received about the difference between confidence and competence, between talking about skill and demonstrating it under pressure. As the formal discussion wound down, several shooters approached Alex individually, asking for additional advice or clarification on specific aspects of her performance. She answered their questions with the same calm professionalism she'd maintained all day, treating each inquiry as legitimate regardless of the asker's earlier behavior. Blake was the last to approach her, his earlier hostility replaced by something that might have been respect or might have been simple recognition of superior ability. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I made assumptions, said things I shouldn't have." Alex nodded once, accepting the apology without making a show of it. "The course will be here next week if you want to try again." It wasn't forgiveness or condemnation, just a statement of fact delivered without judgment. Blake could take it, or leave it, but the opportunity for redemption remained available if he chose to pursue it with a different attitude. Word of Alex's perfect run spread through the tactical training community faster than wildfire. By the next morning, Tactical Edge's phone lines were buzzing with calls from instructors, competitive shooters, and military personnel wanting to know more about the woman who'd made their impossible course look routine. Marcus Webb found himself fielding inquiries from organizations he'd never expected to hear from, elite units looking for advanced training, federal agencies requesting consultation services, and equipment manufacturers wanting to understand how someone had achieved such results with unmodified gear. But the most significant call came from the facility's corporate ownership group. Webb, the voice on his secure line, belonged to Colonel James Patterson, retired Marine and current director of Advanced Training Solutions, the parent company, that owned 12 similar facilities across the country. "I'm seeing some interesting reports from your location. Something about a perfect qualification run and proprietary system information being disclosed." Webb straightened in his chair. Patterson didn't make casual calls, and his tone suggested this conversation would have implications beyond simple curiosity. "Yes, sir. We had an unusual situation yesterday. One of our qualification candidates turned out to be the original designer of our testing protocol, Alex Keene," Patterson said, confirming he'd already done his research. "I've been reviewing her consultation files. Impressive background, military engineering, systems design, competitive shooting credentials that read like a special operations resume. Why wasn't she on our consultant roster?" "Sir, I believe there was some disagreement about intellectual property attribution when the system went operational. She wasn't credited for her design work." The pause that followed lasted long, enough for Webb to wonder if the connection had been lost. "Disagreement," Patterson finally repeated. "You mean we implemented her system without proper attribution or compensation?" "That appears to be the case, sir." Another pause, this one carrying the weight of corporate legal implications and ethical considerations that extended far beyond a single training facility. "I want a full review of the original contracts and implementation decisions," Patterson said, "and I want Ms. Keene offered a formal consultation position with appropriate recognition and compensation. This should have been handled correctly 6 years ago." While corporate wheels began turning in distant offices, the immediate aftermath at Tactical Edge continued to unfold. Blake had returned that morning, not to retake the qualification but to observe other shooters attempting the course with Alex's guidance. The change in his demeanor was remarkable. The aggressive confidence and dismissive attitude had been replaced by focused attention and genuine curiosity about improving his performance. He asked technical questions about target recognition, sought feedback on his movement patterns, and accepted criticism without defensiveness. "I keep rushing the transitions," he admitted to Alex after watching footage of his previous day's run. "I'm trying to beat the clock instead of reading the targets." "Time pressure is artificial," Alex replied. "The targets don't care about your schedule. They present when they present, and they're either threats or they're not. The clock only matters if you let it control your decisions. Trey had signed up for a remedial training session, acknowledging that his gear-heavy approach had been compensating for fundamental skill gaps rather than enhancing actual capability. He'd switched to a basic rifle similar to Alex's, focusing on marksmanship fundamentals instead of electronic accessories. The transformation of the facility's culture was palpable. Where competition and ego had previously dominated conversations, shooters now discussed technique, decision-making processes, and the mental aspects of performance under pressure. Alex had become an unofficial instructor, her presence changing how everyone approached their training. But the most significant change was in how the staff viewed their own facility. David Chen had compiled a comprehensive report on Alex's original design philosophy, revealing layers of sophistication in the course that most instructors had never fully understood. She didn't just design a shooting test, Chen explained to a gathering of facility staff. She created a teaching tool that provides feedback on everything from basic marksmanship to complex tactical decision-making. Every target placement, every timing sequence, every environmental variable was chosen to test specific skills. Marcus Webb nodded thoughtfully. Which explains why our pass rates have been so low. We've been administering a graduate-level exam to undergraduate students. The implications extended beyond tactical edge. If Alex's system was truly as sophisticated as it appeared, other facilities using similar protocols might be struggling with the same issues: high failure rates, frustrated students, and training outcomes that didn't match expectations. That afternoon, Patterson arrived in person, a tall, lean man in his 50s with the bearing of someone accustomed to making decisions that carried significant consequences. He'd brought 2 assistants and a briefcase full of legal documents that suggested this visit was about more than casual facility inspection. His first stop was the control booth, where he spent an hour reviewing video footage of Alex's runs, both the current record and the sealed beta testing videos from 6 years earlier. His expression remained neutral throughout, but his questions were detailed and technically sophisticated. His second stop was a private meeting with Marcus Webb, during which personnel files, contract histories, and implementation timelines were discussed in terms that would have made corporate lawyers nervous. His final stop was a conversation with Alex herself. They met in Webb's office, a utilitarian space that felt cramped with 3 people and the weight of unresolved corporate history. Patterson's approach was direct but respectful, acknowledging the situation's complexity while addressing its practical implications. Ms. Keene, I've reviewed the circumstances surrounding your original consultation contract and the subsequent implementation of your system design. It appears there were significant oversights in how your contributions were acknowledged and compensated. Alex listened without comment, her expression neutral but attentive. I'm here to correct those oversights, Patterson continued. We'd like to offer you a formal position as Senior Systems Consultant for Advanced Training Solutions, with full credit for your original work and compensation commensurate with your contributions to our training protocols. The offer hung in the air between them, not just a job, but recognition of work that had been appropriated and anonymized 6 years earlier. It represented vindication, financial compensation, and professional acknowledgement that had been unjustly withheld. Alex considered the proposal for a long moment before responding. What would the position involve? Development of next-generation training systems, evaluation of current protocols across our facility network, and consultation on tactical training methodology for military and law enforcement clients. Essentially, you'd be doing what you should have been doing all along, designing the future of tactical training. It was more than an apology. It was an admission that Advanced Training Solutions needed her expertise to remain competitive in an evolving industry. Her demonstration the previous day had revealed not just personal skill, but systemic understanding that could transform how tactical training was approached across multiple organizations. Blake, who'd been observing from the main facility floor, watched through the office windows as the conversation continued. He couldn't hear the words, but he could see the body language. Respectful discussion between professionals, rather than the confrontational dynamic he'd created the day before. The irony wasn't lost on him. His attempts to diminish Alex's credibility had instead led to full disclosure of her expertise and what appeared to be significant professional advancement. His hostile skepticism had backfired completely, creating exactly the opposite outcome he'd intended. As the meeting concluded and Patterson's entourage prepared to leave, Alex emerged from the office with a formal offer letter in her hand. She paused near the observation deck where several of yesterday's shooters were watching new candidates attempt the qualification course. "Decision?" Webb asked quietly. Alex looked out at the course she'd designed, watching another shooter struggle with target discrimination under time pressure. Her system was working exactly as intended, teaching lessons about patience, precision, and judgment that couldn't be learned through equipment upgrades or competitive bragging. "I'll let you know." "Tomorrow," she said, but her tone suggested the decision had already been made. The facility felt different now, not because of corporate politics or personnel changes, but because everyone understood what they were really dealing with. The course wasn't just a test, it was a teacher, and its creator had finally been acknowledged. Not as an anonymous consultant, but as the architect of something that could transform how people understood the relationship between skill and performance. 6 months later, Tactical Edge Training Facility had become something unprecedented in the industry, a place where failure was treated as education rather than embarrassment, where shooters came not just to prove their skills but to genuinely improve them. Alex Keene's nameplate now occupied a permanent position beside the course entrance, Lead Systems Designer, Advanced Training Solutions. Below it, a more detailed placard explained the philosophy behind the training protocols, crediting her with developing assessment systems that teach while they test. The transformation had been gradual but profound. Pass rates had increased dramatically once instructors understood they were teaching to a sophisticated educational tool rather than simply administering a standardized test. Students arrived with different expectations, seeking growth rather than validation. Blake Renshaw had become one of the facility's most dedicated regulars. After 6 attempts, he'd finally achieved qualification. Not with his original time of 43 seconds, but with a methodical 57-second run that demonstrated mastery of every principle Alex had tried to teach. "Turns out speed was never the problem," he admitted to Trey during a break between training sessions. "I was trying to impress the targets instead of reading them." His transformation had been more than technical. The aggressive competitiveness that once defined his approach had been replaced by focused improvement and genuine respect for the complexity of tactical decision-making. He'd even begun helping newer shooters understand the mental aspects of the course, passing along lessons he'd learned through hard experience. Trey had found his own path to qualification, achieving a clean run in 54 seconds with equipment that looked nothing like his original custom setup. The expensive optics and modifications had been replaced by iron sights and fundamental marksmanship skills that Alex had helped him develop. "Funny thing," he reflected, "I spent more money on gear than most people spend on cars. But what I really needed was free. Just better understanding of what I was actually trying to accomplish. The betting pools had disappeared entirely. The culture of competition and ego that once dominated the facility had evolved into something more collaborative, where experienced shooters mentored newcomers and success was measured by collective improvement rather than individual dominance." David Chen had been promoted to lead technician, his role expanding to include analysis of shooter performance data that helped refine training protocols across Advanced Training Solutions' entire network. His discovery of Alex's original contributions had led to a company-wide review of intellectual property practices and consultant attribution policies. "We found similar situations at 3 other facilities," he explained to a gathering of corporate trainers. "Talented people whose contributions were implemented without proper recognition. We're working to correct those oversights and ensure future collaborations are handled appropriately." Marcus Webb had received his own promotion, becoming regional training director with responsibility for implementing Alex's methodology across multiple locations. The success at Tactical Edge had attracted attention from military and law enforcement organizations seeking more effective training solutions. "What we learned," he told a conference of tactical instructors, "is that assessment and education aren't separate functions. When done correctly, they're the same thing. Every evaluation should teach the participant something about their own capabilities and limitations." Colonel Patterson's decision to acknowledge and correct the historical oversight had proven financially beneficial as well as ethically necessary. Advanced Training Solutions had signed contracts with 3 federal agencies seeking to implement Alex's training philosophy in their own programs, generating revenue that far exceeded the cost of properly compensating her original work. But the most significant change was in Alex herself. For the first time in 6 years, her expertise was being applied with full recognition and adequate resources. She designed new training protocols that were being implemented at facilities across the country, each one building on lessons learned from her original work. Her office at the facility's headquarters was spartanly furnished but filled with technical drawings, computer models, and beta testing footage that revealed the depth of thought behind every training decision. Visitors often commented on the contrast between her quiet personal demeanor and the sophisticated systems thinking evident in her work. The goal, she explained to a group of military trainers studying her methodology, isn't to make training harder or easier. It's to make it more honest. People need to understand their actual capabilities, not their imagined ones. The training environment should provide that understanding in a way that promotes growth rather than discouragement. On a warm afternoon in early spring, Alex stood in the observation deck watching a new group of shooters attempt the qualification course. The familiar rhythm of preparation, execution, and evaluation continued below, but the atmosphere had completely changed from that contentious Day 6. Months earlier, shooters who failed their runs received immediate feedback about specific areas for improvement. Those who passed were encouraged to mentor others rather than simply celebrate personal achievement. The course remained challenging, but it no longer felt punitive or arbitrary. Blake approached her with a clipboard containing feedback forms from the day's participants, a practice he'd voluntarily taken on as part of his own growth process. Interesting pattern, he noted, handing her the compiled results. Average completion times are getting faster, but more importantly, decision accuracy scores are improving across all experience levels. Alex reviewed the data with satisfaction. It confirmed what she'd suspected. When people understood what they were being tested on and why, their performance improved naturally through focused practice rather than trial and error frustration. The system is teaching them, she observed, which was always the intention. Blake nodded, then hesitated before asking a question that had been on his mind for months. "Can I ask you something personal? That day when I said all those things about the course being unfair, why didn't you just tell me you'd designed it? You could have ended the whole argument immediately." Alex considered the question seriously before answering. "Because the argument wasn't really about the course. It was about whether you were willing to accept that your performance might reflect your actual abilities rather than external circumstances. Telling you I'd designed it would have changed the subject without addressing the real issue." The insight was both gentle and devastating, a reminder that his hostile reaction had revealed more about his own insecurities than about any system failures. But it was delivered without judgment, as simple observation rather than criticism. "I learned something that day," Blake admitted. "Not just about shooting, but about how I respond when things don't go the way I expect. It wasn't a comfortable lesson, but it was a necessary one." As the afternoon training session concluded and shooters began packing their equipment, Alex walked through the facility one more time. The bronze plaque that had once hidden her contributions in small print had been replaced by a comprehensive display explaining the evolution of tactical training methodology and crediting all contributors by name. Her father's coin rested in its familiar place in her belt pouch, worn smooth by years of handling, but still carrying the weight of lessons learned in an Arizona canyon under desert sun. The inscription he'd added years ago remained visible despite the wear: patience and precision. Outside the facility, the parking lot buzzed with conversation as shooters discussed their performance and planned return visits. The competitive edge remained, but it had been channeled into personal improvement rather than dominance over others. Alex's truck sat in the same space she'd used 6 months earlier, but everything else had changed. She was no longer an anonymous consultant, whose work had been appropriated without credit. She was a recognized expert whose methodology was transforming how tactical training was approached across multiple organizations. More importantly, she'd proven something to herself and others about the value of quiet competence over loud confidence, of substance over style, of building systems that taught rather than simply tested. As she drove away from the facility, Alex reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her from anonymous designer to acknowledged expert. She hadn't sought recognition or vindication. She'd simply wanted to see whether her system could teach the lessons it was designed to convey. The answer had been yes, but the education had gone both ways. The course had taught its users about tactical decision-making under pressure, but their reactions had taught her about the importance of standing up for her own work and expertise. In a world that often confused volume with authority and confidence, with competence, Alex Keane had demonstrated something powerful, that true skill speaks for itself, that patience and precision ultimately triumph over haste and ego, and that the quiet voice of genuine expertise will eventually be heard above all the noise. Her story had become more than personal vindication. It was a reminder that recognition delayed isn't necessarily recognition denied, that good work eventually finds acknowledgement, and that the most powerful response to dismissal is often simply demonstrating what excellence actually looks like. The course she'd designed would continue teaching its lessons long after she'd moved on to new challenges. But the lessons she'd taught, about the difference between confidence and competence, between talking about skill and demonstrating it, would resonate even longer in the minds of everyone who'd witnessed her perfect run on that decisive afternoon. In the end, Alex Keane had accomplished something rare. She'd transformed a moment of personal challenge into a lasting change in how an entire community understood the relationship between ability and recognition, between quiet competence and loud posturing, between being underestimated and being undeniable. If you enjoyed this story about quiet strength triumphing over loud arrogance, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. We share inspiring tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, proving that real heroes don't always make the most noise. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever been underestimated because of your quiet confidence? Share your own story of letting your actions speak louder than words.